Hi, my name is Mary, and I'm going to be doing my Paris is Burning reflection and thoughts. So let's start. So the first point of this movie that I think was the most influential for me was just the joy that you can see, and I feel like with a lot of like LGBTQ and queer and trans documentaries, importantly so, a lot of it is focused on violence and the struggles and the homophobia and transphobia that they face every day. But I think this documentary like hit a very different place in my brain because as someone who has really only experienced talking about trans folks and gender non-conforming folks in kind of the light of like struggles that they face, it was really awesome for me to be able to see like the joy that they found in coming together through drag and the ballroom and stuff like that. And it was also really awesome to see their joy even through the pain and suffering that they face, like through the AIDS pandemic and through obviously this film was old and there's transphobia in the world now, but it was obviously so much worse then, especially on like a legal level, and especially with the AIDS pandemic that definitely made living for them a dangerous situation, and for them to kind of like be able to not have that on their minds all the time, I think was a really standout thing for me throughout this. And then I feel like it showed the importance of drag, where in a world where, we're watching like drag documentaries and, where they might take a more comical role, it was kind of interesting to be able to see the history behind it and the importance of it at such a foundational part of drag, and a part where it wasn't as glamorized as it is, or it was shown on a level of the creators of it, which were Black and Latina and people of color, whereas now I feel like drag is shown in a very like white it dominated culture. And so I think it was really interesting to be able to go back and focus on who really were the foundational parts of these really important parts of LGBTQ culture. So I also want to mention that it was a very emotional documentary because you do get attached to these characters that are giving you these testimonials, and you get attached to them, and then you kind of see their struggles as it kind of switches into that part of the film where they're talking about like the violence that they face. And I think it's really a lot more inspirational that they did it in a testimonial way instead of like a documentary where they would traditionally show statistics or something like that. They are showing it in a way where you really get attached to the characters and their stories, and when you listen to them talk about being kicked out of their home just for their sexuality or for their gender expression, it's a lot more inspirational seeing it when you're connected to a person rather than some background documentary talking about it, or a statistic on the news. Like you're forced to kind of see it play out in a real person's life. And then it shows resilience in people of color, trans folks, gender nonconforming folks, and it shows how, even throughout all the struggles that they face, they find a way to continue surviving and continue to create their own joy in their lives in a situation where it may be hard for someone that didn't have to come from that background. But as a person of color or trans folks or queer folks in that time period, they had to find joy in their lives. They kind of had to create their own joy. Obviously, you don't need to, obviously there were struggles. The AIDS pandemic, I think, is a really big part of that you don't get to see in a lot of documentaries and informational pieces about trans and queer folks today, because AIDS is such a it's figured out, and obviously there is still taboo around it, of course, like there will always be, but then it was very different. It was much more prevalent, and it was very dangerous. I mean, you see it throughout, people talking about, you know, violence and stuff, and I'll get into that with the next topic. I believe is the topic about sex work that stood out to me the most. But you do see a lot of the violence that they face, and it's a very obvious thing that you think of in your mind, but going back to that piece where it's like a testimonial, it does mean a lot more now that you're seeing these people. You're getting attached to them as a character. They're not a character, they're a real human being, but you're getting attached to them in the way that you would anyone else, and then you're seeing them go through these struggles, and then it hits a lot more emotional for, you know, people that haven't been able to experience that. And then again, with the sex work, I think that was another huge piece for me, was I think her name was Venus Extravaganza. I think that's what I put on here. She was a character that I personally was very interested in listening to, and she was a character that I just had a lot of empathy for, and you know, I don't want to speak out of place as, you know, white straight female, but she was a character that I felt she resonated with me. And then I think that's a huge part of this film for me, was that them getting you really like close with this character and hearing about this, and you're really interested in her life, and then to hear that she was murdered, it just, I think the real point of that film got across to me at that point, is that these people are in genuinely dangerous situations, especially with the AIDS pandemic, because people then just like, I guess that's not what I'm trying to say, but you do definitely get connected to her as a character, and you want to see her survive, and you want to see her grow, and you want to see her achieve her dreams and her goals, and then to have it end so abruptly like that just because of her gender expression was very like disturbing and like pretty horrific. And the fact that, you know, in the way that she was murdered, and just being murdered in general, just her trying to survive and do her job, was very like eye-opening about society, I think. So it did teach a lot about intersectionality. I felt as though there were a compounding factors of discrimination, you know, besides being trans or genderqueer or gay, or however they identified, they were also Black and Latina and people of color, and those things compound. And I feel like this was a really great film in showing intersectionality, and how, you know, you could face discrimination on so many different levels, and it's much more dangerous as, you know, a Black trans female compared to a Black trans male, or a white trans female. You know, there's just different levels of that discrimination, and you do see kind of the very marginalized groups represented here. So I think that was really awesome. Criticism of this film, I think personally, and even as I'm sitting here speaking now, I feel like a white female in society, it's very difficult for me to speak on this topic because I do not connect with it. However, she is gay, and so there is that connection there where I feel like that kind of redeems her, but she's privileged, white, educated woman, and you know, that could be a way that this film got taken. It shows the importance of, to me, the importance of this film was really the testimonial and the qualitative research part of it. I think that being able to get those testimonials from people themselves in this life was very important, and was a really great way that this was filmed, and it touched on topics that were taboo at the time, or, you know, were not considered part of research, and people weren't really researching them or putting a lot of time into them. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Paris is Burning.